Major.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Thank you for taking the time to be here and get us all in the loop with what's going on,
Absolutely.
what may be on the horizon, what's going on with LOSUM, and sort of what the thought process of the Corps is, going into the rest of summer and hurricane season. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your program.
Really amazing, and it's a testament to the posture of the Corps currently is that you guys are willing to come over here and spend time on a podcast.
Yeah.
So everybody can hear what's going on. Very cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's what a great opportunity to be able to show the public and the constituents here in this area, what the Corps, isn't full of just bad people trying to make bad decisions. And, we are, a human organization run by humans, and most of us are Floridians by birth and trying to give back to our state and ultimately the nation based on our federal positions.
So what's new with LOSUM? I know that's really top of mind for everybody. People are curious. There's been press releases and Friends of the Everglades, and people are saying we're about to be in LOSUM. So what is the real from,
here from the Corps? Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So we're still on track. We're on glide path for mid-August record of decision. So what we consider a ROD.
That's amazing.
So we're on glide path. Actually, today we have a PDT, a project development team, stakeholder engagement at 1300, 1 p.m. virtually. So that'll be hosted by Tim Geis, and he'll go through the initial draft EIS and then present the final EIS and then go through the differences and then take some public comment for that this afternoon. But right now, the public comment period for the final EIS closes on 26 June. Mm-hmm. So if folks need to make comments or voice encouragement or not encouragement, they have the opportunity to do that. Since this is a final EIS, those comments will not be addressed as they were in the draft. So we're required in the draft EIS, if statements or comments are made, we have to go back and close those out on the registry, that we track those. But we're hopeful. We're going to move forward, and we're looking for that signing mid-August when our milestones and pathway is on track so far. There's no things that are going to hold that up, so it'll be great to get that on the file signed. Amazing. And we can operate under that and move forward from LORS 2008.
Huge accomplishment, man.
Absolutely. Over 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years.
And development and coordination with stakeholders. And I think this is a great opportunity for those that are involved, all the stakeholders that were involved in LOSUM, unlike LORS, which was kind of, the Corps was doing it, these calculations and these modeling events, and then presented data. And then people, I don't understand how you came to this determination. But this was a lot more open process, which I think is a testament for future studies and things to be able to work with stakeholders, because at the end of the day, we serve the public and the taxpayer. So those votes matter, those concerns matter, and we're trying to take those in the best we can to formulate and provide the best solution with the known science at the time. So we've seen with the HHD revitalization and remodeling of that with the piping and issues concerned there from a flood risk management standpoint. Things and technology changes, and we've got to continue to adapt, right? So it's encouraging that we're moving forward on LOSUM, but it's not the last one, right? So as we continue to bring systems...
What's the time frame that it will update? How frequently?
So I would say I don't know, because it's based on when construction projects are complete, right? So if we hit a delay in a major project, EAA or some other type of large reservoir, that could impact, how that's going to be brought online. Our next biggest thing, I think, is SEP operations, COP. So we're working through a deviation plan further south in the system and how we operate that. So that's working through the process now, and I think 26 is the last I've seen where we're supposed to roll out the next iteration of how we're going to run the system down south. But it's always going to change and adapt, and as we bring more things and features online, it's going to change how we can manage things. Lake Okeechobee being the largest quote-unquote reservoir that we can use to move water south, it presents dynamics.
How would you characterize? How would you characterize, for people who may be new to following this whole thing, the difference between LORS 08 and LOSUM? Since we're going mid-August into LOSUM now, what can the average resident in Stewart,
From a holistic standpoint, Colonel Booth, the commander of Jacksonville District, has been operating under the spirit of LOSUM. So it's not we're not bound to it legally to operate under that, but we're trying. We will be. But now we will be. So we're trying to, the way we're operating this past year since I've come online, you won't see a large change. It's still going to be, the intent is 0 to the east through the S80, right? Situationally dependent, right? If we have storms, or if we have localized running that we had over the last several weeks here in Florida, specifically the southern and South Florida area, we've got to modify that, right? So we lowered the gates in 308 to backfill the lake, right? So the C44 canal was getting too high for our concerns. South Florida Water Management turned on the pumps to C44. All 4 pumps were running. They were pulling off that canal, getting the reservoir, started to fill that reservoir, right, to get that pressure off that canal. But it wasn't enough. So options are either go out S80 or go back into the lake. And we worked so hard to get the lake down prior to 1 June. But the decision was made to lower 308 and to start filling back into Lake Okeechobee. And if you followed it, you can see the spike that you had on that, and we're still continuing to rise in the Lake Okeechobee right now. But
the recent discharges that we had, do you see that as and this is a hyper-specific and also hypothetical question, but do you see that if we were bound to LOSUM, and not sort of in that purgatory of in between the two, that we may not have had those discharges, that it would have sat more so on the lake? I know this is completely hypothetical.
Yeah, so that's challenging, right? So because we can't predict Mother Nature. The best we can do is 7 days, and I mean we can see further systems out in the Atlantic and the Caribbean, but it's hard to make a determination on that. Was it the right call? Wasn't the right call? We will never know.
Not right or wrong. More so under, being bound to LOSUM. Do you see that it would have sat on the lake more so?
Yeah, so the water control plan has very specific ways that it allows us, as we're moving up through those zones, if the outlook is increased weather and increased moisture and increased precipitation within the basin,
which it was,
right? we have the authority to be able to make releases, right? So with LOSUM, will there ever be releases out of S80? Yes. Right. So like we can't live in a world that's obtuse. Like it's just another way of looking at the system and operating the system. But ultimately, if the conditions are in a way and are concerning, we have to release out of S80 for not only the health and welfare of the public, but for the system itself. So, human life is probably more important than estuary life. I think that's how we can kind of view that. Ultimately, we're going to be here longer, right? We have a sense of a soul to say that we have intellectual thought, right? So to say that the health of the estuary isn't important, it is important, but under LOSUM we would still make releases. So if we were in the same situation we were this past wet season, we would probably still have to make releases. I think we need to be a little bit more proactive as we look at the projections and looking at El Nino and El Nina and how those weather conditions are going to. But again, it's so hard to make those predictions. Could we have done something better? Yeah, hindsight's always easier to look back and say, oh man, we should have started releasing in October, November, December, and have that reduced flow for a longer period. But we're also trying to manage the spat out of the oyster spawning, right? So we knew that if we made that between February and March, that would be able to clean out the IRL estuaries so that they could have a good spat for this spring moving into the summer months. So that was kind of the decision. We had to make that decision. We made the decision and moved out on it. But it's so hard and challenging to know, like, oh man, we should have, woulda, coulda, but we are where we are. We made decisions. We were happy with it. We were super excited that we were on a glide path to hit 12.5 or lower based on the mild drought that we had here in the CNSF, Central and Southern Florida system.
You're at what, 13.3 or something?
13, I think we're at 13.7, 13.6. I don't know. It's increasing because of the rainfall and the basin rain. So I haven't got the report yet this morning, but
Todd Thurlow's got it at 13.39.
Yeah. So it's rising, right? So we did a really good job of preparing for the storms season. hurricane season, and now we're seeing a little bit of rise, which is
that was a pretty nasty rain.
It was intense.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how it was up in this area in Martin County, but in Palm Beach County, it just felt like it rained, no stop. Overcast, no sunlight to be able to dry things out. Just consistent light to heavy rains depending on where you were. Even we celebrated the 249th birthday for the Army, which is June 16th, and the Corps of Engineers or the 14th of June is the birthday for the Army. The 16th of June is the Corps of Engineers birthday, since we're 2 days later. From,
you let your hair down a little bit, or it's still
business? The traditional Army will have typically based on their command, they will get what's called a pass, so they'll get one of the days off, either Friday or Monday, based on operational schedules. For the Corps of Engineers, since we're a little bit different, more civilian focused, we do what's called Corps Days, so we just get together and recognize our civilian workforce and honor them with awards and congratulate PDT teams from the work they did as we move into the fiscal cycle for hopefully Water Resources Development Act 24. So it's great to be able to take the day off. I had a lot of emails and text messages, but I tried to say, hey, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Once I get back in the office, I was up in Jacksonville for that event. We did some here locally in Clewiston with our operations office in South Florida, construction division here in South Florida. Did one in Palm Beach County area. So, it's good to be able to get together with folks and whatnot. But driving out to Clewiston, it was a good inch and a half of water on the road, and it's just slow going, trying to be safe.
Yeah, man.
And it's just running right into the canals and things. And I'm just thinking, man, like, this impact is going to be here for a while, and there's no sign of it stopping anytime soon. But luckily, it's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday we got a reprieve from the rain and got some sunshine, so it started moving back in the right direction.
Every now and then, Florida will remind you that it was a swamp south of Orlando.
It's crazy.
You mentioned WERDA, so any insight on what WERDA may look like? I know.
Yep. So we're pushing for. Western Everglades Restoration Project is on glide path, so that's finishing up as well. I think that's the 24th or 30th of June when that final period is
practical,
done.
tangible terms, what does that represent?
So that means for the western side of the system, there will be options to rehydrate some wetlands out there, subsurface, and to try to reconnect some of that western side of the Everglades and restore that. Which
translates into more water being able to
go into the Everglades, right? So
off the lake.
Yeah. So remember the system CNSF, from the headwaters of Kissimmee all the way down to Florida Bay, it's getting that natural flow to get it to mimic what it was before human involvement. Yep. And Western Everglades is just one keystone project within that system that will benefit the Everglades as a whole. So that was quickly coming up, and that'll be submitted to the chief of engineers for consideration into WERDA, and we expect that to be signed sometime in September. What's called a chief of engineering report, and then that'll go to consideration to Congress for the Water Resource Development Act of 2024.
Yeah, because it looks pretty dry over there.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. When I go out to visit our west side stakeholders. It's a different environment. Naples, Bonita Springs, all that area is completely different. Marco Island, all that area, Immokalee, and that's just a completely different area, and how they are looking at it. So it's a lot more land space, flat farming, cattle industry that's over there, and there's concerns that that's going to impact their livelihood, which is completely fair, right? So. Why is the evil federal government coming in and putting it in project, and now you're going to put, possibly more water on my land, and, these impacts with increased rainfall events, and it's not a normal, quarter inch to half inch, it's, 18 inches like we saw in this last seven days storm. And it's interesting because the environment's changing, right? And you got sea level rise, global warming, you have all these other impacts. And we see that with hurricane events, the rapid intensification as they get closer to shore, right? So it's interesting time we live in as a human race, and seeing how we're adapting to that. And it's
so what you're saying is
challenging.
We should, for all of the back and forth in the last 5 years, we should have some sort of LOSUM party. at the Rivers Coalition meeting. That's
Absolutely.
what yeah. Give you guys at least a high five, and we should all celebrate what happened.
Absolutely. I think it's a great time. I mean, look, it's a lot of hard work from everyone,
Yeah,
not only from the Corps of Engineers, from the federal side, but from the state and the local stakeholder engagement. I mean, there was a lot of influence from the stakeholders locally to be able to voice concerns and understand the processes that we have to go through and the bureaucracy that the federal government provides. And I think that, again, it kind of let the veil down a little bit so that folks can see how the process works.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there's communities and within that larger group that kind of wanted all the cake, but you got to understand that you can't have all the cake and eat it too. You got to figure out what piece of the pie you're willing to make a sacrifice on from the organizational perspectives that you are trying to hold still within your organizations, but also try to make initiatives to make the best decisions for the federal government, right? So it's a balancing act. But I think the LOSUM process that everyone got to experience is what we're going to try to do forward, and we'll do forward as we move through the next iteration of LOSUM 2.0.
Yeah.
So, I mean, absolutely. I mean, where else would you have to be able to impact and make an influence on how things are operated in the community that you live in, right? And that's what government is about, right? Is be able to make your concerns as a local constituent on how it impacts you, and then the federal governments and local governments have to respond. And I think it's not too uncommon in how the nation was created and started, right? So it may be more burdensome now with a lot of the more processes that we have to do and the legal issues that we run into and challenges that present themselves, but that's how it's supposed to work. That's how the nation, the republic, is supposed to operate, is exactly how you guys saw and experienced LOSUM.
I believe it's a model for how the federal government should function. You know, the tinfoil hat is usually that the larger corporate interests
absolutely
behind the scenes just pull the lever. So to actually have the Corps going around to the other stakeholders and not just the largest power players, right? And get their opinion and see that in real time make its way into the way you're going to operate that's the republic in action.
Yeah,
that's beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah. Speaking of that, right, as much as we're all looking forward to celebrating, how with Sugar already in active litigation with the Corps over LORS 08, you know, what's a likelihood that that's coming soon?
That's a great question.
After LOSUM is signed
so
and codified.
I mean, once we have a ROD, you know, I'm not sure what their positions are going to be. If they do enter litigation, then you know we'll have to see what the courts say. But right now, I don't know. I don't know if that's happening. I don't know if that's a possibility. I have not heard anything from our team about that. But I'm also kind of new to this. If it does happen, you know, we'll just have to be at the mercy of the courts, and we won't be able to make active comment on that. But you know, I'm hopeful that everyone's on board. They sat at the table too, right. So there should be no excuses on why folks are upset with it moving forward. So we're all on board together. We all sat down together and worked through the challenges together. And LOSUM is the next thing, and everyone needs to get on board with that. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get a ROD and a record decision and move forward and be able to start operating into that and make some progress to protect the estuary here in the Stewart area.
Again, hypothetical, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that hypothetically they did, you know, file suit. Would that bog down or hamstring the Corps from being able to operate under LOSUM?
So this past year, under LORS 08, we've been operating in what we call the spirit of LOSUM. So we have up to values that we can flow. And from a strategic standpoint, we would operate the same. So our messaging is beneficial releases. You know, if we have a high lake stage, we'll have to address that. As we saw that we did in February to March this year, we kind of made high flow releases to the east and west to be able to bring that lake level down so we can prepare for the storm season, hurricane season of 24. But overall, if litigation does occur, we're just going to operate. We're going to operate what we can and legally, whatever the courts tell us we can operate in. LORS 08 being the record currently, we would default back to that, and then you know we'll use our up tos to be able to make those release decisions.
I think that's a big point you just made. So if again, all hypothetical, but if Sugar did sue the Corps, you would have to revert back to LORS 08 until such time as a judge sorts it all out, right?
Yeah, exactly. So once the final litigation and terms are discussed and everyone's copacetic with that, they would say LOSUM is this with this, or LOSUM is not acceptable. But again, being kind of new to this side of things,
and you're not a lawyer.
I'm not a lawyer. I don't know all that stuff.
Right?
Yeah, so the litigation aspect of it, we would still use Laura's 08 because that's what we have now. But again, like the way that this LOSUM was developed and integrated with the stakeholder community, I would not see why would there be a reason to go to litigation with courts just because there was involvement from the beginning.
Right.
If folks didn't have a voice in it, and didn't want to be participating in it, that would have been developed and heard of 5 years ago, right? But here we are getting close to finalizing this thing and moving forward. I would be hopeful that the folks that are against it would realize that the public is not, and they would be on board with it as well.
But, I mean, again, neither of us are lawyers, but it would seem like you'd have a really good case for why would we change anything?
Yeah.
We all work together on this project. Yeah. Now that it's done, you want to get more of it in your favor. Well, to me, why wouldn't the city of Stewart join suit with the Corps and every other stakeholder to make sure, it just seems like a big mess.
Yeah, it would be what a legal snafu, right? Like all these different things would change and people would want to jump on board or jump off board. And, again, everyone had the opportunity to discuss it. And I think every comment was addressed. You'd have to go back and look at the registry, but every comment that was made is addressed in the draft form of LOSUM. And as we move to final, we are where we are, and record decisions forthcoming in a couple months. It's just everyone had the opportunity to speak up and speak out, and and hopefully that information that was provided in rebuttal was enough to satisfy the need. But if not, then that's why we have courts, right? That's why.
Well, hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Hopefully, stay positive.
This is all just
it's hypothetical, right? It's all hypothetical.
We all had a chance, and it's now going to be buttoned up.
Absolutely, yeah.
So hopefully not.
Yeah.
Hurricanes, man. That's.
Yeah.
I mean, besides LOSUM, I feel like the current forecast for hurricanes that I keep hearing about.
Yeah, there's one off Mexico.
Has everybody
low pressure
tense?
Storm. Yeah.
So how does that affect LOSUM? How does that affect?
So operations of the lake is the main aspect, right? So we made those large releases in February, March, and that was to ultimately reduce the stage in the lake to a level where we can receive increased rain, right? So you've
been prepping for this.
Oh, absolutely.
We're not reacting. Right?
This isn't a reactionary situation. We can't predict how the hurricane season is going to unfold. We got low system storm in Mexico right now. Mm-hmm. It's going to provide a lot of moisture and rainfall to the Yucatan and possibly North Texas as the storm moves through, or southeastern Texas. But it's unbelievable to be able to make a prediction of what hurricanes will hit South Florida, North Florida, Miami, the Keys. Like, that's so unknown. But we know that there's going to be increased activity. We just had a low pressure storm come through a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, that lasted for a couple of days, and it brought up to 18 inches, 24 inches in some places throughout the southern system. So our model showed us during the release schedule that we ran for February to March was around 13 feet. We're like, modelers are super stoked. Everyone's happy. We're going to be able to hit 13. We actually got 12.53, I think, is the lowest we got on the lake, mm-hmm. Which was more than what we expected just due to the local mild drought along the system, mm-hmm. and specifically further south in the system in the WCAs, which allowed us to allow more water to be released and then treated and brought through the system, which was huge. We didn't think that was possible this summer.
It was dry, man.
And it was dry, and it's still dry, right? So North Florida has their own challenges with, not getting a lot of localized rainfall, but here in South Florida, it's still dry. But we are hopeful, and we can remain hopeful during the hurricane season.
So are the WCAs, the mm-hmm. water, those areas, are they, let me pull them up.
Yep. So during the release,
are they
schedule,
pretty dry?
No,
right
they're all above schedule.
Okay,
they're all above schedule, unfortunately. So we got below schedule after the releases and be able to move water, and then it got dry. April in May were dry, and that was great for the system overall. We were able to move more water and continue to bring the lake down on the stage. But then we had this rain event, so now everything's above schedule again, which presents challenges, right? So we continue. We're also bound along the L29 until 1 July to be able to raise that to 8.5. So we have to operate at 8.3 right now feet. So getting more water out of the WCAs right now. We're at capacity. We're max flow on the Tamiami flow formula. So we are, with this increased rainfall that we had over the last 2 weeks, South Florida is releasing out of what's called the S197 structure, and that's releasing the tide. So there's just a lot of water down there, localized flooding. We saw in the news, right? So Miami, all the southern area of Florida was impacted greatly on this, and local water management, flood districts and management districts have been working hard to be able to get after that. And then Colonel Booth was out last week meeting with folks to make sure that everyone's comfortable and the federal government stands here ready to assist. But it seems like the local drainage districts and South Florida Water Management District has it under control, and
hopefully, right?
Yeah. So we have this reprieve, right? These last 2 days we've actually had some sun and drying out, so we just continually be hopeful, and just the occasional afternoon thunderstorms, which we're used to here in Florida, which isn't uncommon. But the long sustained rainfall, similar to what we would have in a hurricane, is hard to manage and hard to predict. So I know I tell folks all the time,
a wild range of variability.
Absolutely, variables are you can't control. And I tell Jacksonville team when I go to Miami for a day trip and there's any type of rainfall, there's localized flooding. The streets have a little bit of rain on it, and as long as people understand that, as you build and provide impervious surface, that's roofs, that's concrete, asphalt, driveways, all these other things. If you look at it from a holistic standpoint, that's a lot of surface area that would naturally soak in the water, that we have not allowed to do because we have concrete, asphalt, etc. on it, homes, buildings, etc. So that water collection on impervious surfaces has to be collected and then dispersed, right? So I was reading an article this morning that people are concerned, all this fresh water is being wasted and let go. Okay, well, where would we put it? Because now, similar to other projects, you have to purchase the lands. The state would have to purchase the lands to make these retention areas, reservoirs, whatever you want to call them, to hold that water to be able to use later. But Miami, I don't think there's a lot of green areas available other than the parks that have been safe now. So it's really hard.
At what point, I'm not for eroding home rule or regulation. I'm a free market kind of guy and small government kind of guy. But at what point because the federal government, you guys are going to have to step in when we've made a big enough mess with so much concrete and people are, floating in rivers on the streets.
It's challenging, right?
Like, at what point do you at least recommend a certain amount of green space, or instead of just baffle boxes, and maybe you do already and I'm unaware, but
underground storage.
Man,
so I brought this up.
If we need to retroactively do it because there isn't enough based on the calculations.
If storage. It's all about storage, right? Like it's really hard. When I was in Fort Eisenhower, which is in Augusta, Georgia, I was with the Corps of Engineers there, and we had an underwater retention to collect stormwater runoff under a parking lot. And it's like, oh, wow, that's, why can't we do that here in Florida? Well, the issue is the topography, right?
The water table, too.
The water table, right? So, like, okay, cool, we can dig a 30-foot hole, but it's going to be full of water.
Right.
So the options are above ground storage is what we have here in South Florida. Even North Florida, I don't think you'd be able to do any type of subterranean storage just because other than ASR, aquifer storage recovery. But, there's challenges with that as well. So it's just, it's a unique problem. And how do we, and then you're combating sea level rise. Like, how do we deal with all these challenges? So we have a lot of this.
Even outside of that.
Yeah.
You are building cities on a swamp.
Yeah.
And you're asking the Corps to try to divert water away from where you've built your house on the swamp. Right. There should be, in my mind, some kind of recommendations. There's some kind of matrix that you have where you need a certain amount of surface area that's pervious, and even beyond that, trees.
So I think a lot of local governments are taking initiatives and making that a part of the community designs, right?
We do, but it's like,
but from a federal perspective,
it's not a cohesive. Hey, we're the guys that are going to have to get the water out of here. This is what we would recommend.
Right. So, but it's different levels of government, right? So
Right.
we're talking federal, state, and local. So a lot of local communities, like here in Martin County, have taken initiatives to be able to get after some of these things, move ahead of water quality challenges that the states is wrestling with. So there's, that's how the government is played. Unfortunately, that's how the system is built, and we're not at a level where the federal government's going to come in and say, this is how you're going to build a community. That's overstepping the bounds of the federal
Recommendations,
government.
maybe.
Well, I mean, if they hire us as consultants, that's one thing, but I don't think folks are willing to do that. We can.
Is that available?
So
Does the Corps offer sort of municipal?
So local governments
consulting?
request support. We can help them under certain authorities. We can help them. There's other programs out there that we can come in and help design and provide experience on. So like Palm Beach County, for instance, is doing what's called a CAP. We're doing some restoration projects there in the Lake Worth Lagoon. There's options out there, but it's, again, the bureaucracy and these things are so thick and huge to read through, and you need a team of lawyers and folks to be able to see where you can pull on.
But like in Palm
strings.
Beach, you're doing stormwater risk management, right?
Coastal storm risk management.
What is that? Just for example.
So beach renourishment is the best way to think about it.
Okay.
So my first experience with the Corps was actually in Miami last year when I was conducting a relief in place with my predecessor, and I was like, he's like, oh, we're going to Miami Beach, da 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 da. I'm like, why are we going to Miami Beach? I don't need to do that right now. Like it's not what I believe the job is about. And he's like, oh, trust me, you'll see beach renourishment. Have you ever seen a project like this before? No, I haven't. So we went out there. The project engineer gave us a tour, and it's clear as day. You could see where we increased the beach depth, 500 yards or so, putting soil back on the beach, and where there wasn't any, where it was eroded away from storms, hurricanes, and natural erosion from tidal basin conditions. And what's right next to that is a seawall built in the 1940s. And right on the side of that is businesses and hotels and other people's homes. So is it beneficial to be able to provide storm risk management? Absolutely. From a coastal perspective, the investment from the federal government to come in and put in these renourishing the beaches protects a lot of the economy here in the state. So for us, it's a great situation. Now, is it all one fit bill and every beach in every area? No, it's challenges, right? There's a process, there's requirements, there's all these different easement requirements and how all that's worked, and public access. It's challenging, it's complicated, but our team always tries to find initiatives and use intuition and initiatives to be able to figure out the best way to get after providing that protection to that investment that the locals have made, to protect that stuff. So it's challenging. There's a lot of times it gets turned off, but if we I'm hopeful that we won't have a lot of major storms this year. But under FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, there's options there depending on beach erosion and damage to the infrastructure there. So there's options out there. But you have to apply for them. It's a process, and it's really with the local governments that we coordinate with. Palm Beach County, we're having some challenges there, but we're moving forward. We just had a ribbon cutting on Monday at St. Augustine area for beach renourishment up there, and there's challenges. And the ESA, the Environmental Species Act, is changing, so the queen conch has now been added as a species to look for, so that presents new challenges for future projects and how we kind of manage that. So it's a great investment if you look at it, and it also helps combat sea level rise, right? As the water continues to rise, you got to have that buffer, and that sand, by re-putting sand out there, allows that to be slowed.
Are you seeing sea level rise? Is that something you guys are measuring and observing?
So we have models.
Because I hear it a lot.
We have models.
Warming, sea level rise.
It's challenging. So with like Katrina and New Orleans, right? Like they're at sea level and they're riding the line, and I feel like this ecosystem restoration stuff's kind of new, and kind of recreate these man-made wetlands for the Everglades specifically, but to combat all these other challenges we have, it's interesting to see how we're approaching it, right? So Florida is a beach state, so we have lots of coastline, and most of it is beach, not a lot of rock formations. So it's easier for us, and I would say for other states that don't have that option, where they've already put in seawalls and all these other things to try to combat that. It's how our society's built. I think it's how the public kind of perceives things. Most folks want an instant gratification, right? Most folks want a quick fix. I want it now. I want a seawall. It's easy. It's cheap. It's done. I can live with it. But so then there's the maintenance, the after effects of that, right?
Right.
And if you take a more
water's strategic somewhere
role, then you would have to do different things like beach renourishments and all these other things. And it's trying to balance that. And the public, I think, needs to be aware that there's options. Of course, there's options. But what are we looking for the generations after us, right? Like that's what, I think folks need to think through is the 50 year, the 60 year, the 100 years from now. How do we look? How does the state look? How does the local area look? What do we want to do? What do we want to show our kids, what do we want them to know about our area, from the world-class fishing here in Stewart to the Everglades? If we don't do something, then we'll lose those things. Mm-hmm. So it's just, I caution folks that want a quick fix, because quick fixes can be great for instant gratification, but from a long-term strategic point, it may not be the best option available. It all boils down to cost benefit, right? So what investment does the federal stakeholder get involved versus a local, and what impact will that have on the economy, and will the federal government receive that return, right? So it is complicated. There's a lot of calculus that goes into that. It's just not a simple, hey, we're pulling this one off the shelf, we're moving forward, and that's how it works. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes that that we can't really talk through, but there's a lot of debate. There's a lot of things that go through modeling and all these other different things to be able to get to the optimal solution through feasibility studies to be able to see if we can move forward on some of these projects.
Back to hurricanes for a second.
Sure.
You're not a meteorologist, nor am I, but you've got a lot of really smart people at your disposal. Is it that we've gone from El Nino back to La Nina? Is that shift what creates all of the storms, or is it just that we're going back into that, out of El Nino that's typically less storms, and we're going back into our normal rhythm of 8 or 9 years of?
Yeah, I'm sure there's cyclics. If you look at the trends, there's probably cyclic. So I was reading an article by Colorado State University. It talked about the ACE. It's I forget what the actual term means, but it's a circulation energy that they can measure in the oceans. And they saw a huge spike. What they're going to see for 24 based on the winter numbers, they're like, oh yeah, it's going to be a really rough season. And then finally came out, they're going to be at least 24, named systems. And so it's kind of interesting how all that calculus goes into it. I'm not really abreast. I'm not a meteorologist.
That makes sense. It's bigger than El Nino, La Nina.
Yeah, and then just same as solar threats, right? You have minimum, maximus. You have kind of a cyclic. You can kind of predict what you're going to see, but you could have a rain event that's 18 inches, 24 inches, that just develops in not a real hurricane or a low pressure storm, but a low pressure front like we've experienced the last couple of weeks that can provide a lot of rain. It doesn't necessarily have to be a hurricane to provide a lot of rain that we'd have to manage and deal with. But from a hurricane perspective, it's challenging. I mean, that coming off the African coast, out of the Sierra Desert, all that particulate gets over the ocean, virtually turns into a large hurricane and is in the Caribbean, and then, it's landward for the United States. It's challenging and it's unpredictable. We could see see a low pressure storm right now over Mexico that's going to impact Mexico. Who knows how that's going to strengthen? And NOAA has their systems and processes and monitor these storms. I think it was in May, I went up to the National Weather Service in Miami and went through the Hurricane Center there, met with some of the meteorologists there. And, their position, the way I kind of perceive their position is, hey, look, you live in Florida, hurricanes are a thing, be prepared. Don't live in a bubble, stay active and monitoring, whatever weather outlets you get your information from. But it's incumbent on you to make those decisions to get out of the way based on the hurricane. And we've seen that with NOAA changing how they present their data with a cone of uncertainty because it created some issues before. But it's challenging. These are Mother Nature. These are nature's responses, and it's unpredictable. They can make changes instantly, or they can just sit in an area, station area.
Some of these DARPA guys, to work on
some
weather mod.
AI.
No, weather mod. You got a Iron Dome. Why can't we have some sort of weather mod hurricane dome on Florida? Right?
Yeah, shields up.
Yeah, shields up.
So it's fascinating. Like, it's if you think about things, how NOAA's putting up new satellites, weather satellites to look at different things. They've put up new satellites to look at blue-green algae. The technology is great, but it comes at a cost, and nothing's instantaneous. And it's kind of like buying a new vehicle, right? There's so many electronics in there, so many subcomputers and computers and components in that thing. You take it off the lot, and now it's obsolete because now there's a new automated feature that just came out, or a new standard that has to be enforced. It's challenging. It's the same as buying computers, laptops, smartphones, right? Everyone's new rage. You get a new whatever smartphone you want, and a couple months later it's obsolete, right? There's new RAM, there's new this, there's new that. So it's so hard to be able to do that, but and putting things in space is no easy feat, and it comes at a cost. And there's organizations that have reduced that cost to be able to use reusable rockets and things, but still the cost of building these platforms to get them in orbit is costly.
Florida needs to get Space Force involved, right?
I mean,
so with the hurricanes again, I know I'm beating this to death, but I'm scared.
Everyone should be concerned.
I'm a homeowner.
I am too.
When I rented, I didn't care. It was fun. With your data of prediction that your Army Corps is looking at, right? What are we thinking is coming?
So
what are we preparing for on your end?
So we've got the lake the best we can, in position to be able to perform whatever hurricane event, So from a strategy standpoint, from how we're going to operate Lake O, we have to take storm by storm event. So we're comfortable we can take one storm, right? So it's getting the back-to-back storms with no reprieve to be able to operate the system. That's where the concern is, but that's unpredictable. We don't know that. We don't know if all these named storms are going to occur, and if they do, they're all going to be beeline to Lake Okeechobee.
Right.
That's improbable to know. That's to me to say, well, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. We don't know. We have to take it storm by storm.
But you guys feel good. You feel like we're
very
in a good
comfortable. Yeah, we're very
into
comfortable right now with the hurricane season. We did not think we were going to get this low in Lake Okeechobee.
Awesome.
And we did. And we're super excited and hopeful, and we'll remain positive on how we approach these storms. And we'll be transparent. We conduct media calls every Friday during the wet season, and we'll be up front and forward with everything we make and the decisions that we make. And not make them in a vacuum. Again, we're trying to balance, agriculture needs and estuary life, right? So it's a balancing act on how to move water around the system to best benefit all of us. And, we'll take it storm by storm, and we'll communicate if we have to do releases.
But I think it's worth mentioning that there is a possibility that if there are back-to-back storms,
absolutely,
even with the lake in a good situation,
like if they
may be
absolutely
looking at discharges.
You could be releases this summer, right? So if storm sits off and just builds and just dumps water on Lake O and the entire CNSF, it presents challenges. And to think that's not going to impact folks in estuary and releases south, like it's all contingent upon how much rainfall, how much we receive, and where it's received. If you look at the Caloosahatchee water basin, this rain event has dumped massive amounts of water down the Caloosahatchee. So what have we done? We stopped releases out of S77 there until the natural basin can get clear of the rainfall that it had and collected over the last 7 to 8 days before we start making beneficial releases back out of Lake O, right? So we understand, and I hope the public understands, that we're looking at all aspects, and we're trying to manage and balance the best we can. And we're hopeful and very, very well positioned for the storm this year.
With Loesome going into effect in mid-August, right?
Yep.
Once that happens and that's signed, it's game on, right?
It's game on.
Okay, so from that moment, and we're in hurricane season, how would you characterize the flexibility of Lorzoate versus Losum in light of hurricane season? I don't know, that's you can't.
Yeah, so hypothetical again. Yeah,
right.
No, that's
if you
fine.
can generalize, maybe.
Yeah, so we have pre-storm, post-storm activities. We will communicate those activities with folks. We have to prepare. We have structures that can withstand a Cat 5 hurricane. So we make
The
efforts.
dike, is that what you're saying, or what?
So the facilities that operate the federal structures around Lake Okeechobee and other areas, they're what we consider the hardened structures to be able to take a Cat 5 hurricane. So we can have operators in place to make assessments post storm, based on lake stages, integrity of the dike, levees, those type of things. And then we have a schedule that we do inspections based on lake stage height and all these other things to make sure that we're being as safe as possible before we have to make a large release out of any of our structures. So from looking at Losum and lures, how will that affect? It doesn't affect our pre post storm activities. We will still do, if you see a storm sitting on the Atlantic or in the Gulf or the Caribbean for that matter, we can't be, let's just open up the floodgates and just get all the water out of the lake. That would not be good, right? Because what happens?
You also have the nightmare of the sloshing, right?
Yeah. So
when the storm comes. That was the thing.
Yeah. Storm attenuation. Yeah. So
the turbidity,
all that stuff.
And
so
now you've got the heat and blue-green algae, and now we're going to dump all of that. That's hell. I mean, that's worst-case scenario.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So wave attenuation on the lake can get up above 40 to 60 feet.
Right.
It's a huge, if you think about it, it's a huge tub. And if you fill up a tub and you move it side to side, that kind of shows you how the wave attenuation works.
It's the wind from the storm? What?
Yes, the wind.
Not pressure.
It's the wind that creates that friction that draws it to one side of the bathtub as it leans over.
Right.
So
the storm moves past and it sucks it the other way.
Yeah, so it's just like tidal. Yeah, just like tidal effects from the moon and the sun is the same thing with a storm event over Lake Okeechobee. So people wonder why is a lake embankments 40 plus feet in some areas? What's for the wave attenuation? It's not so we can hold the lake that high. It's so when the storm event happens over the lake or near the lake that creates that differential to be able to keep people safe, right? So we don't want another 1926, 1928 issue where the dike fails and we kill a bunch of people, right? That's not good business, right? So we've got to protect our infrastructure. We've got to protect our public from those type of events. That's why the project was authorized in 1949, and that's where we are today. And we're trying to continue to move forward and be progressive in management and techniques to be able to provide the best safety for our public.
So we feel good about hurricanes. We feel like we've got it under control. as much as we can.
Yeah.
Right? Just lots of prayer.
Yep. That's all we can have. Stay positive.
Beyond that, I mean, what's new? We're at about 47 minutes here. What else is relevant that you think people around here
I think for Stuart, there's some great things to be able to discuss, and that's kind of
beyond just what I want to talk about.
What
do you guys got going on?
So a lot of great things. We just had a open house here in Stuart for Indian River Lagoon projects that we have coming online. So the reservoirs for the C23, C24 system. So that's moving forward. C44 is moving forward. How's
C44 doing with the seepage?
Yeah, seepage management features, right. So, the design, I think, will be finished in sometime calendar year 25. So we're moving forward. I think all the soil testing and geotechnical has been completed by our sister district in Mobile. So they've completed that. They're working through the design now. And then the anticipated final design will be in sometime 25 with construction award in 25 with construction completion in 26.
That's pretty quick.
So we're moving forward on it. Yeah. It's challenging, right? Like, again, the topography and the karst, how
is
it works.
Is it something that you build around the entire reservoir?
It's just going to be in that area,
in that weak area?
Southwest. It's not a weakening of the structure. It's seepage. So again, permeability of soils. So as you bring up the C44 above 10 feet, we see saturated areas on the embankment. So that's why we can only operate up to 10 feet right now.
And the nature of that soil is just what is it about that
cause the increased percolation there?
Right.
So I'm not a geotechnical person, mechanical by trade, but it's percolating through, which is causing just it to be wet, and it becomes a maintenance issue for the mowers and things out there. To be able to operate, because we keep the facilities mowed and fresh.
It's truly not a structural issue. It's
not
just
structural
more of a
at all.
maintenance
It's a
issue.
maintenance issue for South Florida Water Management District. So it's buying a new car and you got a slow leak in the tire, right? Well, you're going to deal with it yourself, or are you going to go back to the dealer and say, hey, I paid X amount for this. The expectation is this functions. It's not meeting my expectations. Can you fix it? And in this case, the federal government said, hey, we noticed an issue during the operational maintenance and testing phase.
Yep.
Hey, we're going to fix this.
Do it right.
It's not your fault. It's our fault. Let us go back and look at it. And what they've determined is seepage wells will be the solution. So what the final design looks like, I don't know.
Okay.
But
Do you
the
mind
concept,
characterizing what that?
the concept is you have these well relief wells in certain areas. It takes that's under. You got to think of it 3D. So under the soils, the percolation occurs and seeps through. Before it goes through the limestone into the aquifer, we can capture that, put it back into the seepage canal, which are around all the features, right? And then from the seepage canal, they can pump it back into the reservoir.
Got it.
So that's kind of the concept of it, is you're collecting the water that would come through that percolation and now just redistributing it back through. So it's kind of a closed loop. You can think of it like a closed loop system. It's just going to, so it doesn't propagate up through the soil and embankment, that it would just be pulled through and then pump back around. Holistically, if you think it in large features like that, without getting into the details.
And so currently it's at what depth?
We'd have to look on the website. I have not got the report yet this morning, but I know that they turned on all 4 pumps last week with the rain event to be able to move water into the C44.
And when it's all completed, we'll be looking at 15 feet?
15 feet is max operational height for that. So I know that they're still working through the study and the modeling on what the minimum pool is, because I've asked that question every time I've taken some college students out during their Everglades week to kind of show them, hey, this is what we're doing here to protect the Everglades and the beneficial things we do through the STA systems, etc. And, we brought them out there, and all you could see is just all these gators, all these bass jumping in the background, all these flocks of birds and waterfowl everywhere, and it's just amazing. So I asked our team, I'm like, hey, what's the minimum pool? And then come to find out they're still working through the details and trying to figure that out, because that worst thing I would want to happen is we draw it down super low, and then all these animals that just appeared in there are now dying, and it's our fault because we decided to keep the water levels at not a beneficial biological level that they can be able to sustain the life that's in there.
One of the concerns I've heard is that, if this is an issue with a smaller reservoir, that sort of projects out to the EAA reservoir, but they're very different in design and structurally, correct?
Correct. So
you
it's
wouldn't
great.
expect seepage
it's a great
to
question.
be...
So, and I try to express this on our leaders as well throughout the entire chain within USACE. We saw an issue with C44. Now, to live in a bubble and say, oh, that's unique, that's the way it is, Florida, you could have a negative view of it. But, I try to stay positive about all things. And what this has allowed us to use, apply the effects of knowing how these things operate.
Smaller scale tests.
Yeah.
Kind of
So not only that, but like from a holistic program standpoint, right? There's other features, the C11, 111 impoundment in South Miami-Dade area. So there's cutoff wall features to be able to not do that, like we did around Lake Okeechobee, right? So those cutoff walls is a concrete kind of mixture that doesn't allow percolation through that, and it's just a lot slower, and it goes down instead of through, right? So it's just a different percolation type barrier to be able to do that. So we have a project coming online, going through the feasibility study and all that process and design work and things, and we were trying to get them awarded for construction this year, but they're did some geotechnical just to hey, let's double check this area and this area to make sure.
You're talking about?
I'm talking about C111
Okay, got it.
impoundment in Miami-Dade.
I understand.
So that we didn't have a cutoff wall in one area, and then let's go recheck. C44. Let's go recheck. So we rechecked, and now we've got to add additional cutoff wall to have that added security. Applying the lessons learned from C44
Perfect.
right into a super small impoundment area, water impoundment area, to be able to apply that, right? So it's great, and it's be able to fix those things now instead of, okay, here's the keys to the car, figure it out. Oh no, there's issues. Oh well, let me have the keys back. I think it's great from the course perspective to be able to say, hey, look, we're going to apply these lessons learned not only in these types of projects, but across all of our business lines to make sure that we give the best product, delivering it on time, on schedule, within budget that we can. It's not fair to the taxpayers for us to be able to go back and have to say, oh, sorry, we got to.
Especially something with the scale of EAA.
Yeah, so the EAA reservoir is massive.
Lessons.
Yeah, massive.
Small.
C43, massive. These structures are massive, right? Is there challenges? Yes, but we can work through those, and I think as long as people understand that we're trying to mimic nature and the way it was intended to work from a human perspective, which is hard to do. We're trying to mimic something and create something that's not supposed to happen. Above ground swimming pools that are 160,000 acre feet of storage.
How tall are those walls?
I think C44 and
for
EAA is like 40 some plus feet.
Right.
But
and how high above ground?
23, I think 23, might be 35 embankment, 23 height of water level. I mean, think about it. That's almost, almost a full atmosphere of pressure, water volume. So it's crazy to think about. So it's pretty interesting. Yes. I mean, this is crazy. And then folks ask, well,
how to be able to truly support that much water. Absolutely,
storage of that water, and be able to release it through the storm treatment areas to clean it and then get it to the Everglades. It's crazy, and folks ask all the time, well, how do these waterfowl and how do these bass and alligators show up into the?
If you build it, they will come. Man.
It's just amazing how nature responds in a positive, way. And I think that's indicative, without human involvement, that's where they would have been anyway, right?
If we're all gone, they'd figure it out.
Yeah, they know this. They know how to sense weather changes and all these other things that we have no concept of try to understand, and they can do that. And, it's kind of interesting how you build it and they will come. And it's great to know that we're trying to.
It's only us that are a bit disconnected from nature. We want
control, they're all dialed in. Yeah, we just want control and manipulate things and have it our way when we want it. And it's kind of interesting how a human domain works and operates. It's kind of interesting, but it'll be hopeful too as we move through these federal projects and providing recreational.
What's the latest on EAA? Do you have a time frame?
No, not for EAA. For the IRL STAs, we're just over 50% for the storm treatment areas there. So. The idea is that we can get those completed and they can start treating water for the Indian River Lagoon system and estuaries prior to the reservoirs coming online. So we're trying to get after things and provide initial system benefits before the completion of reservoirs.
How about north of the lake, the Kissimmee?
So there's Kissimmee Restoration Project.
There was a storage.
There is a Lokar, Okeechobee Component A reservoir that's moving forward. That's South Florida's lead on that.
Awesome.
There's also LORP, some other projects with wetland restoration, ASR, South Florida Water Management District has leads on those. We're working with our Engineering Research and Development Center, ERDIC, to kind of work through the challenges of aquifer storage. So there's challenges there unique to our topography. So they do it other places in the nation, but for some reason we're having challenges here from an arsenic perspective.
Are we having any hangups? Are there projects that are stuck or that we're not moving forward?
No, everything's moving. It's it's just slow. I know folks want it now, and it's not like you can go to a home improvement store, pull it off the shelf, and install it. It doesn't. It's not a light bulb. Right. So it's challenging. There's ebb and flows, and the hurricanes have a huge impact in that, right? So if there's a storm event that could impact construction projects, we've got to have our workers safe so they can continue to execute this program. So they've got to stop work. So those rain delays are built into our schedules and things like that. But if it's prolonged in an intense season where we have storm, pounding Florida.
I don't even like for you to say it.
That's going to present challenges. But, I think, we can just stay positive and maintain positivity and see how things play out.
Prepare for the worst.
That's right. It's all we can do.
Pray for the best. So, well, I appreciate you taking the time to be here and let us all know what's going on. Again, much respect and appreciation to the Corps to be willing to communicate. It's really cool, that level of relationship. So thank you for stopping by.
Awesome.
And,
Yeah, I appreciate being on the program and be able to let the public and your constituents know, and hear the folks here in Stewart know, we're not evil, we're not bad.
No.
We all have, it's part of our job, right? Like, and it's unique as an active duty military person to be able to perform this duty. It's a great opportunity, but the Corps full of great Americans that want to silver service civilians that are supporting our nation and building these projects that they can look back and tell their kids and grandkids, like, hey, I helped design this. I helped build this. I got to see this construction. I got to be a part of a huge ecosystem recreation plan that no one has seen in the entire world. And the Everglades is just one portion, So as we move with different portions and navigation projects and things, it's going to be interesting to see how we respond to those and be able to understand the balance between human requirements and the nature we live with.
And I think that your, again, physical presence, your human presence and willingness to share and communicate is it's a testament to where your guys' heads are at, currently and going forward. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, have an awesome day. Thank you for stopping in. We'll check in the future.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully it'll be a nice, boring hurricane season, right? Losum will be nice and
in effect.
Right, and we'll have very little to talk about, man.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.